So, what is the actual event that you're in town for?
I'm here with the American Public Gardens Association's annual conference in San Francisco. Every year they have a conference at different places around the country. And what is tying me to that organization is, well, of course, I have work at a public garden, but there's a group of curators that are of bonsai museums that are organizing a plant collection network. The APGA, American Public Gardens Association, organizes collections of plants at arboretums and public gardens around the country that are like reference collections of a certain plant. So if you were going to go see basically a living textbook of maples, you could come to the arboretum and find that. You could see all these maples that are they're in one location, they're organized, they're labeled correctly, and growing healthily. So the arboretum has multiple collections like that, one of oaks and one of boxwoods. But there's never been a collection of bonsai. And bonsai incorporates a lot of other things besides just the living plant. And it's the artist that has created it, the culture that it comes from, the multiple generations that have grown it, and its history and provenance. So we're working together with other institutions like the FIPS in Pittsburgh, and Denver Botanic Gardens, Mathai Botanical Garden and Bonsai Collection, and these different groups are coming together to bring their collections and databases together so someone could look up information about the bonsai that they have and know like how many John Naka trees, for instance, are around, and where would I go to see them.
Is someone going to create an infrastructure for all of this? Like
That's
a shared database or a place where we can see images of these things?
That's the plan would be to do this through the American Public Gardens Association.
And so they would do that more infrastructure lift for that part.
Yet to be seen. We'll see how. That's what we're meeting about.
That would be a fascinating project. What started all that?
Well, it kind of came about from something my predecessor Jack Sustick started, a consortium of curators, and to bring curators together to talk about their issues and things that they have to deal with, and help each other with their collections. And then that then turned into the idea of a plant collection.
That is so neat. I'm lucky in that I get to go to a lot of different public bonsai gardens over the course of a given year. And I like to share anecdotes or just tell stories about things that are working really well at the different gardens. But man, when you can get curators together, that seems like it'd be much, much more effective at just coming up with good ideas or sympathizing with common challenges.
Yeah, well, we get really busy, and we tend to, be found mostly in our own collections, working on them. But it's hard to get away sometimes. But this brings us, a little together, like starting to communicate a little bit more.
And actually, on that note, that we might as well just cut straight to, it's got to be, we all know how much care trees require 24/7. When you're responsible for a really prominent collection, is it easy or hard to let go of that when you go home from work and you know a heat wave's coming or a cold spell is dropping in?
Well, we have to always be aware of the environment and the weather, what's coming. So yeah, we're always on our toes. If something bad could happen, we have to take precaution ahead of time. Move a plant. Put something in more shade. Block the wind. Tie it down. Whatever it be. And sometimes you leave work and you think, did I do that? Did I
did I close that door? Did I lock that gate?
Yeah. So yeah, you don't it's always on our mind.
Yeah.
I think as curators.
And so that sounds just like I'd expect any enthusiast to say, is it the trees are always kind of on our minds. And that's why I find these old trees, especially the trees we find in collections, to be so precious, because you can tell a visitor to the garden, yeah, we didn't miss a watering for 40 years.
Yeah.
Or 80 years, or however long that tree's been in training. It's an amazing thing that we can get so much life and beauty out of these old trees.
Yeah, it's a long tradition of care, and it doesn't stop. It definitely is a lifestyle. People talk about bonsai becoming a lifestyle. I mean, when you say ties you down, it sounds bad, but
Yeah,
it's
I don't
a good
think of
thing.
it that way.
It's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, for me,
I think maybe not. I'm sorry,
No.
but it's not like tying you down, but more keeping you grounded.
exactly. It's either, and it's an opportunity when we get to spend time with trees. Like that's the fun and exciting part of it, is like, hey, I get to be with this tree right now. That may require that I make sure it's watered, but I get to have that role for this tree's life. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a great sense of purpose, and that's important to have.
It is. Now, I bet none of this crossed your mind the first day you saw the collection at the National Arboretum.
No, I didn't see. You don't see responsibility or work or sweat and toil. You see. You see inspiration, beauty, and excitement, and you feel those things. It's really touches the soul, maybe.
Is that what was on your mind? So, what was the first time you ever saw the collection at the Arboretum?
I don't know the exact year. It was over 25 years ago, and I believe I went there with my father, and it was. I had found out about it. I knew it existed. I asked him if we could go together, and we went to a Potomac Bonsai Festival. And I at first, I all the trees inspired me, but like at first it was those amateur trees from beginners and hobbyists that really like sparked my interest, because they were so, just so creative, so different. They were, they weren't as refined, but they had like a real spirit and sense of style to them.
It's funny. I think often the older trees, the more developed, the more abstract things, they just kind of bounce off our consciousness. Whereas younger, more humble trees, we can kind of get it. They are closer to our experience of container plants just in our day-to-day lives. And it was the same for me. The tree that sparked my interest, I can tell you, it was summer of 1993. I remember where I was standing. I remember what the tree looked like. I'd known what bonsai was my whole life. But the first time I saw a wired tree that had been kind of styled, I didn't even like it. But man, there was something evocative about it that, again, I remember it like it was yesterday. Not yesterday, let's be serious here, but I do have a clear picture in my head of what that tree looked like. And so that's funny that it was those more humble trees when you were young that made you think. Well, what did it make you think? Or feel?
It just made me want to do this. This is something I really wanted to try and understand. How it's just so unusual to see. A plant that should be large, and we are very familiar with them, seeing them out in the wild, but that's totally manipulated in both its roots and its shoots, and yet still looks in proportion to those old trees.
So did you have trees at that point?
No, I didn't. I had plants, and I enjoyed growing plants, but I didn't have, and I liked the nursery, the trade of woody perennials. So that was very interesting to me at the time.
How long before you had your first bonsai after that visit to the Arboretum?
Oh, it was probably within the same year. I'm sure I started right away. I had the bug.
Uh-huh. And then how many years once you started growing bonsai before you found there might be a way to actually participate at the museum?
Well, I was still in college when I was, practicing on my own, and that's not a great environment to have, a collection of trees. You're moving, back and forth, and you don't have that stability of care watering regularly. So, it wasn't until after I got out of college that I wanted to really dive in and learn bonsai. Yeah, so I contacted the museum and asked. It was Jack Sustick as curator. Then he was a recently appointed curator. Warren Hill, his predecessor, had just left, and shortly before that, Bob Dreschler, the first curator, had retired. And I asked Jack, "Do you need help? Because I would love to volunteer in exchange for learning." And he said, "Sure."
And so, what were those early days like?
It was working a few days a week
Wow.
for Jack, whatever he needed done at the museum. Whether it was weeding or just being present around those old trees that have been cared for so long and been evaluated for their aesthetics for such a long time. That's really important because with bonsai, like anyone can start a tree from a seedling, but it really is about having older advanced material where you really having access to that good material where you really learn. And if you don't have access to that older material, it's hard to know how to get there from a seedling.
It's good to hear you say that. I think that's a point that's missed a lot is it's hard to know how to make a great tree if you've never interacted with a great tree. If you don't know how to maintain a great tree, it's really hard to build a great tree. How are those pads structured? What does make up the apex? What gives it that proportion that is so evocative? And so did you come up with a way of kind of formally studying all that? Do you think you just kind of breathed it all in and by interacting with it year after year, it just kind of, the design precepts just kind of clicked after a while?
Well, I studied fine arts in college, so bonsai is a lot of visual design. There's that transfers from whatever art you're doing, sculpture, painting, visual concepts of design go throughout all art forms, and apply the bonsai as well. So, negative space, repetition, harmony, all those artistic principles. So I understood that, and then I was studying plant science, and that's a more formal, education on how to, prune and manipulate the horticulture and how to, alter these inner plant hormones like auxin and cytokinins to shape a plant, shape a tree like a tree. So when I was studying, the botany and the plant physiology, I always had bonsai in mind, trying to learn how I can apply these principles.
You could not build a better starting point for bonsai. Studying just basic artistic principles in school and then the science behind the plants. I don't know what else you'd want to add to that other than maybe studying some engineering to figure out how to manipulate the things. What a great start.
Engineering, yeah. The branch and the formation of wood, having a good understanding of that, and definitely, yeah, it helps. It's even about like the weight of the real weight, not the illusional weight of a tree, but understanding the real weight of a branch, how much water it's holding. Even those things, you prune a branch off and it pops up, but understanding how much weight in the branch itself to hold it in the position that you might want it for a while.
I like that idea. I've never heard of anyone talk about it like that, but you notice that when dealing with trees of considerable size is the altering the length of a branch is going to radically change the balance of the rest of the tree, not just visually, but like physically, because some of those branches are very heavy.
Yeah, a lot of times bonsai have very stiff, woody branches that don't move much, but some of the most beautiful trees are very like thin and thin, twiggy and elegant. So that's not that stiffness that like a trident maple often has when it's plucked and pinched repeatedly on its silhouette forever.
That's right. Or even trees that look very soft with quite undulating movement. Your giant coast live oak comes to mind from Al Nelson. The tree's massive. It probably weighs as much, if not more, than I do, which isn't saying much, but it's a big tree. And so, how do you create that softness knowing that the wood is so darn hard on that oak and that it's so inflexible once a lot of the wood starts building up? It really has to change how you think about working on trees like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You also probably didn't grow up working on coast live oaks.
No, that's a Western species, and I grew up on the East Coast. But that came to me where I was at. Al Nelson donated his coast live oak in, I believe it was 2016. And it's an incredible tree. He could have sold it, but he wanted it to be available for everyone to see for free at the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum.
That's so great. And it was in a really prominent spot when I visited. Everyone walks by kind of in that middle upper courtyard right there. It was in a great spot.
Yeah, it's a tree that looks good from the front, from the back. It could be redesigned to have any one of those be the front. But it is a very large tree. Our central courtyard, our upper and central courtyard, is really like a melting pot of all of our three main legacy collections. So, the museum started in 1976 from a gift from Japan. The Nippon Bonsai Association put that together. Saburo Kato was the president at the time and really searched throughout Japan to find 50 trees that would be appropriate as a gift, a diplomatic present to celebrate America's 200th birthday as a country. And that gift was formed. The imperial household got wind of that gift and they wanted to join and be a part of it. So 3 extra trees from the imperial garden were given. And then that's what really started the museum. So since then, we've added legacy collections like the Chinese Penjing collection and the North American collection of native trees and North American artists. So we maintain those 3 main collections, and then that central courtyard really becomes a melting pot of all 3 of those. We also have another collection that is trees that don't fall into those 3 legacy collections. We may enter into our study collection, and that's more of an educational collection. It doesn't mean it's any less good. It's just it's just not a part of. It doesn't tell the story of that Japanese, Chinese, or North Americans culture of bonsai.
It's funny how quickly lines can become gray with bonsai because it's a practice from one part of the world using material from any part of the world, worked on by people from any part of the world. And then any one of those things can be produced and then moved around. So you're getting a California tree from a California artist now on the East Coast. You have Japanese trees built and created over very long periods of time with Japanese species over here. The Penjing collection is its own really interesting mix of people working on the trees from different places, but a lot of the material, whether native to Japan or China, or even built in the United States by American Penjing practitioners, it's just baked into every last one of your collections. You have a really neat diversity of backgrounds on these trees.
Yeah, well, nature's wild. It's hard to structure it, but as an arboretum, and the National Arboretum is a research facility. So, our role is to take plant DNA, we call it germplasm, and preserve it and conserve it for whenever it may be used, needed in the future. So it's a living repository, a DNA library maybe, and we are a part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then under that, the Agricultural Research Service is the branch of the USDA that is its role is to do research to help the in our case the nursery trade, the ornamental plant trade, and so the our role is to put some structure to that wild nature, have things labeled correctly, have them growing in the correct locations where they're healthy. Of course, we can't have a complete collection of woody plants,
Right.
being in Washington D.C., but we have we're gathering that knowledge of what it does grow there well, and what can and what can't. And we're sharing that germplasm with the industry, as well as breeding the needed traits into those plants to make them better, make them more ornamental, make them more valuable. And you would think that bonsai doesn't fit into that, but it really does, because bonsai just does a different approach to increase the value of ornamental horticulture. It uses artistic principles. It turns the plant into a medium to create art or visual interest. And I mean, we use it in our landscapes all the time, but it's rare that landscaping is brought to that highest level that bonsai teaches, where a plant, every single branch is put into the correct place to
Yeah.
represent something.
Instead of the entire garden being the product of the energy, it's that individual tree is the product of the energy that goes into it. It's funny hearing you describe, when you look at the role of the arboretum into the industry, location, the country in which it's situated, how a wonderful metaphor bonsai is for that, where you are preserving trees from different places and you are trying to get the most out of their beauty through the care and all of the artistic contributions that go into it over time. It's you kind of couldn't come up with a better kind of element to add to the arboretum at that point.
Yeah, it's one of the most popular gardens in the Arboretum. The Arboretum is free to the public. It's not on the mall. It once was, but it in the early 1900s was moved to where it is now, and it's the largest green space in Washington D.C. So it's a place where people can escape the city and relax, and see cherry blossoms in season, see the crepe myrtles that have been bred by the National Arboretum scientists, ARS scientists, and then escape into the Bonsai Museum. When you first enter the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum, you instantly go into our Cryptomeria walk, where large Cryptomeria japonicas are planted to create this shady forest setting. And on both sides are plants, these many ephemerals and things that would be treasured for the companion plants that go along with bonsai, the kusamona and those individual herbaceous potted plants, and many of these ephemerals and short blooming things were collected from expeditions of explorations of past directors of the National Arboretum, like John Creech, that would go to Japan and look for plants that weren't grown in the U.S. that would grow well because they're in the same latitude, but just on the other side of the world in Japan and Asia, and could be brought back and introduced to the nursery trade.
And when you talk about how the garden is the biggest green space in the area, it really feels like you're out in the middle of nowhere out there. It's this wonderful oasis of green. Just getting to the Arboretum, it's like, oh, we're in a different place now. It really does kind of reset how you feel. And then inside the Arboretum, when you start entering the bonsai gardens, like you say, you walk through this passage that then further separates you from the rest of the Arboretum. Now we're in a different kind of space, and then you enter into these main courtyards from which you can visit whichever pavilion you happen to hit first. And so it's this really neat just space within a space within a space to get to where you're finally enjoying the trees.
That Cryptomeria walk was just redesigned this about a year ago. Boulders were brought in with a crane and set by a very good artist that put them in very natural positioning, so they feel like they were there forever. But then the garden was redesigned to, I think in America we're intrigued by the Japanese garden. They have been trained, where people have been gardening what looks to be a natural forest, like the around the temples of Kyoto, and Tokyo and all throughout Japan. They were, they look like they're not touched by humans, but they're touched an incredibly lot. And but now, we don't necessarily need to use all those same plants that have been used in Japanese gardens. We have these native trees that really grow well here, but the same designs and ideas of like that make a garden a great space and make it feel like it's, the plants are almost communicating to you as you walk through. They're not. It's how they're placed and designed that evokes that feeling. But that whole area was those ideas were taken into consideration, and we used Virginia junipers as a main focal point to create a grove of pines that are poking out above what will someday form into mounded shrubs that will represent the Blue Ridge Mountains. This area is just like bonsai, represents our native trees and what they look like in a ceramic container. Our gardens do the same.
So an incredible amount of thought has gone into everything a visitor walks past casually. They have no idea that so much work has gone into the plant selection, the plant positioning, and then even the stages of the garden that people are walking through as they come through the garden there.
But we don't need them to know all of that work. They just need to enjoy it.
And it looks fantastic. I was last at the garden, I think, 10 years before, 15 years before, and then coming back after a big gap. You could see the refreshed part looks absolutely fantastic, and that'll grow in and it accomplish its own age as that then grows in, and it looks really, really good right now. I was there in spring. There's a reason you all host Bonsai Fest in the spring. Like, the garden looks stunning that time of year.
It's a young garden, but gardens change and they get better, just like an old bonsai tree.
With the right custodians, they get better, and you clearly have a great crew making sure all that happens. It's kind of neat. So you get to work with other corners of the Arboretum, I assume, to do that landscaping and to contribute to the designs.
Well, yeah, the Arboretum's garden staff does contribute to all portions. I tend to be in the bonsai museum within those walls more often. But yeah, it's a collaboration that goes into things like that, and we have incredible access to plant material in throughout the arboretum and the other collections.
Yeah, way more than going down to your local Lowe's or nursery. You probably have a few more resources for material.
We moved some very large trees from like other ends of the arboretum, and they were hand dug and
Nice.
lifted and put into place, and they look like they've been there for a lot longer than they have.
That is so cool. So, how long, when you first started volunteering for Jack, how many years went by before that turned into a position?
Well, yeah, I wasn't doing it to get a position in bonsai. Really, I didn't.
You were just doing it 'cause it was fun.
I wanted to learn it, and I wasn't, didn't intend to make profit off of it. I was just wanted to know how to do it. But when I volunteered for a full summer and left, and I got what I wanted. I mean, I learned an incredible amount with Jack. No expert, of course, yet, but it was a great experience. But then I got a call back. A position opened up, and I accepted it, and then I stayed until 2005. So worked there full time for a few years. We had maybe the fifth World Bonsai Convention when it was held in Washington in 2005. Mm-hmm. And Jack was a large planner in that.
And so, what was that first role at that point?
Well, it was the position that opened up was actually curator of art and artifacts, and that's not the position I'm in now, but it's we still have that position. It's more of like a museum a museum specialist position. Kathleen Emerson Dell holds that now. It's in charge of all of the Suiseki stones, then the non-living objects that accompany and our collections. We have a large collection of Chinese viewing stones as well as Suiseki Japanese viewing stones, and as well as some prominent diplomatic gifts that have been given to past presidents, like a tiger stone that was given to President Clinton, and then a chrysanthemum stone that was gifted to President Ford.
For those who aren't familiar, do you have a good, quick comparison of what's the difference between, say, a scholar stone or Chinese viewing stone versus Suiseki?
So when I spoke a minute ago about trying to organize nature, and we try to like organize these art forms too, but it takes generalizations. Yeah. Of course, one comes from Japan, one comes from China, different geology, but it's more than that. There's different aesthetics. You want stones in both that maybe have not been altered, but oftentimes they are altered. They're cut or carved, but if it's done well, it's hard to notice. And a lot of the Japanese stones are well, of course, they're very dark, and they will look like a mountain or some natural scene. Now, the Chinese stones, they really go out of just that representation of a natural scene, and many of them are abstract and with holes, and it almost look like nebulas of the universe rising up out of a wooden stand. These aren't garden stones. We love our large boulders and geology in our landscape, but these are stones that are too good to put in the garden. These are stones that are art of their own, just like bonsai is, and they are, meant to be put on a carved wooden stand and displayed like fine art indoors.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like instead of being more representational, they are just inherently interesting. A lot of them resembling a picture that comes out of the Hubble telescope more than anything we might find on the planet, or at least be able to identify with. Just really brighter colors, more varied shapes, fascinating textures, just things that invite you to take a step closer and just really see what's going on and appreciate that versus and take a step back. And that stone does look like a mountain or a plain or a hut or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, they can be many different things like fruit or animals, of course, and but these are generalizations because both the Japanese stone appreciation and the Chinese stone appreciation have a lot in common.
Yeah. And is it now? I know there is a building that had a bunch of stones on display. Are there stones out there every day of the year?
Yeah, you're talking about our exhibit gallery. So
Yes.
that's the area where the stones are displayed. And we also have special exhibits there. So we have benches where we can move bonsai or stones or objects or educational exhibits into that area. This year, we're going to be having a special exhibit. Kathleen Emerson-Dell is creating an exhibit on our 50 years of history, because this is our 250th anniversary as a country this year. So our museum has been around 50 years now, and a lot has happened in the past 50 years. We still have that collection of trees from Japan, and we're going to be celebrating new things at the end of this year.
Ooh, say more about that. What do you have planned?
We are having a celebration in November, the weekend of the 6th, 7th, and 8th, and we are going to be commemorating a gift of 6 new trees from Japan. The Nippon Bonsai Association has donated 6 trees and 3 suiseki to commemorate that 50 years. And 50 years ago, it was Saburo Kato from the Garden of Bonsai that organized that gift, and now it was his grandson, Takahiro Kato from Bonsai, who gathered these 6 trees. So we'll be presenting those. Now they're going to be in quarantine. They came over from Japan. They can't be released for 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so they're being grown in controlled spaces right now to make sure that we're not releasing any harmful insects or diseases or viruses into the country. But once they're released from quarantine, and they're very healthy, and they seem to be very clean at this time, so we're observing that. And but we will be showing the trees, and then in addition to that, we'll be commemorating a collection of 4 Korean bunjin. Bunjai, which is the Korean form of bonsai, or Penjing, the Korean equivalent, and that's really important because our museum tries to tell the history of this art form as it began in China, went to Japan, and now it's practiced all over and in North America with native species. But Korea was that essential link when the art form traveled through that country into Japan from China. And so those 4 trees are also in quarantine, but we'll be sharing images of them. And then we're going to be honoring some North American bonsai artists. So 50 years later, the art form was really new in this country, and the bonsai were young, and now there's artists in America making trees that would stand up to even the best of the best anywhere in the world. So we'll be receiving some new trees from North American artists. And
Oh, that's fantastic. Will there be events for the public to participate in November?
there'll be vendors and food trucks, and also we're not done the planning, but there may also be like science cafes and educational experience things to do.
So
and
not
learn.
unlike the Bonsai Fest, there will be kind of multiple things going on at the collection.
Yeah, as well as announcing some research that we're going to be doing that's specifically related to bonsai.
Ooh, that sounds really interesting. I know a lot of people will be curious about that.
Yeah, then they should come and enjoy that event with us.
Where will people be? Where do people find out about all this stuff? Will you be promoting all this on the website?
Yeah, the best place would be the Friends of the National Arboretum,
Gotcha.
and as well as the National Arboretum's website.
Okay.
And now we've had some changes recently in our the organizations that support the museum, because in the past the museum, although it's always been run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, it provides it gets a lot of support from the National Bonsai Foundation in the past 50 years. That's been the organization that has been a nonprofit that raises funds and supports some projects in addition to federal funds. It's a private public partnership. Uh-huh. But now the NBF has gone away, but it's the FONA, Friends of the National Arboretum, is the organization that is taking on that role, and it's even a larger organization.
Wow.
That has always helped the Arboretum as a whole, but the Bonsai Museum is also falling into the support from that organization.
Oh, that sounds great.
It will be great.
So we will be looking forward to the details as they come out. As it gets closer, we will check out and see how the plans are coming together.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of it? Are you going to be personally planning a lot of this?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, working with other Arboretum staff. Yeah.
On that note, who all do you have helping you take care of the trees at the garden these days?
So the museum staff is made up of myself, curator. Andy Bello is assistant curator, and almost every year we have an apprenticeship program where we train someone, and the goal of that is to have that person gain the knowledge to be able to work in and have a career in bonsai. And there's few of those around. So that's a competitive situation. But this year is the National Bonsai Apprentice is Samuel Azanza. And it's great to have him there. And we also receive help from 14 volunteers at the moment. Mm-hmm. That number changes, and goes up and down, but 14 is how many we have currently.
Whenever the word volunteer is in a sentence, we assume the specifics move around a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they give their time, which is a very valuable thing.
Yeah. It's a really awesome crew you have right now. I've known Andy over the years, and we got to hang out at Walter Paul's garden actually in Germany last summer and had a blast. And so it was fun to see you all just taking care of 10 million things during the Bonsai Fest, for example. That's a big event with a lot of people in the garden.
Yeah, that's our. It was good to have you there as a visiting artist this past spring, and the Potomac Bonsai Festival is one of our largest events. The Potomac Bonsai Association puts that on, but it's the museum that celebrates World Bonsai Day that same weekend. So we work together on that, and it's one of our largest events. We'll always bring in guest artists, and we have demonstrations and vendors, and it's always a lot of fun.
When I think of I like going to bonsai events of all stripes and all locations, but it's like when you're in the middle of nowhere and you have a bonsai event, that can be great because it's just your bonsai crew, period. But there's always a little bump when you do it in a place with a lot of foot traffic and a lot of people are just, they get the surprise and delight. Oh, what's this? Oh, let's check this out. You get the double perk if you have lots of people coming by, but they are there to see the bonsai and it's part of their visit to the arboretum. And so it was really awesome to see how many people got to participate in this event, not necessarily to shop, but just to see the trees and enjoy what was happening, to attend talks or demonstrations and to just participate. It's really, really nice when events can be held in spaces like that. And I got the feeling that a lot of people just know to go to Bonsai Fest every year.
Yeah, they do. There's, the local clubs and practitioners and hobbyists all look forward to that and then participate. They show their trees. So there's, the Potomac Bonsai Association puts on they use a special exhibit swing and put on an exhibit, which you critiqued. So that was great. And there are a lot of people that are just traveling through the museum on a busy Mother's Day weekend. So those are people that sometimes are surprised and it turns on a lot of people to bonsai when they see that excitement and that festival that festival brings.
And I don't know who's in control of the weather that day, but it was sunny and about 74 degrees. It could not have been any nicer. And so pretty much everyone was just smiling, glad that spring had finally sprung, and we're just really happy to be there. I don't know if I told you when I was doing that critique. So in this special exhibits wing, the Potomac Bonsai Association, is it, that set up the show right there?
Yes.
Is that who it is? And so there was a wonderful small exhibit in this space, and I'd known I was going to be doing a critique, and we could talk about the trees themselves as well as the display. And so having worked with members of the PBA, I was assuming we would have a much more nerdy technical discussion of all things bonsai. And I think another tour happened to be coming through at the same time. And so when the critique began, there might have been 60 or 70 people crammed into that tiny space. And I looked around and thought, oh, this is not a bonsai crowd. So my first question might have been, how many of you, came to see the bonsai? How many of you have a bonsai at home? The club members all raised their hands and the other 50 people just kind of smiled. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a completely different talk. And then at some point they stuck around for 15, 20 minutes. And then I guess that group moved on, leaving behind, actually, it was only about half bonsai people and half non-bonsai people. And the rest of the non-bonsai people stayed through the end of the whole thing. It was really, I love it when non-bonsai people just find everything interesting. Either that or just hopelessly looking for something to do. But it was just really cool. And so we had a much more technical discussion at that point as the club members started asking more questions.
You don't have to be an expert in bonsai to enjoy it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's taking the natural world and just bringing it in smaller and making it accessible. Yeah. And that's what people get when they visit the museum. They're able to see what the bald cypresses look like in the swamps and what the liquid ambers and the sweet gums look like leaning off the riverbed and over the creeks and things. So you get to be transformed and go to these places where these trees would be growing wild. In our Penjing collection, you get to see what a sea looks like, in the South China water, and how the rocks jut up right out of the water. So it recreates, our world and represents it in miniature. And that's the point of it. So it doesn't take an expert to enjoy it. But when you know all of those things that go into it, it makes it more appreciated.
Exactly. And that's what's fun to see is when people are taking it all in and they can imbibe that much of the bonsai info and they're just like, wow, really? Oh, and how's that work? Oh, and that's that? Yeah, they love it. It's great. And I know you're surrounded by that every day of the year, which is kind of awesome. A lot of us spend a lot of times in our collections. And so What a treat to be reminded almost daily of what a wonder it must look like from the outside.
The casual visitor that is going through, it actually helps the museum, and they don't even realize it, but they're just seeing it through new eyes. They're commenting, they're walking through and enjoying it with friends and family, and they're saying what they think of it, and oftentimes we're just in the background watering the trees, but they don't realize they're giving critiques of the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum to us
That's
all
right.
the time.
And their perspectives are as valid as anyone else's perspective, because we're all just people, and the garden is for the people, and so it's worth listening to what they're thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, in terms of that journey that they make going through the pavilions, is what I remembered most about my first visit again struck me this year, which is I really like the way the pavilion's laid out, where you move from space to space to space. Even within a given pavilion, it's a bunch of micro courtyards where you see some number of trees at a time. And it's like you have these natural little loiter and enjoy the tree spaces that you are really presented one at a time, sometimes highlighting a single tree, sometimes highlighting a bench or collection of trees. It's a really great way to experience the kind of bite sizes of trees.
Well, and that's actually an important factor for the health of the trees, because when we have so many, we try to have a diverse collection of many different species that require lots of different growing environments. So by having a wall that faces north and is shaded on the west, we can have this little microclimate that will grow like a maple really well in Washington, D.C.'s hot summers. Yet we have the sunnier walls that are blasted by sun, and we can't put a maple there throughout the summer, or its leaves turn into crispy, chips. But yet a pine grows just fine there.
Yeah, I noticed it kind of backwards, because I would say, oh, I noticed there's a bunch of junipers all next to each other here, or maybe several junipers and a couple maybe native pines in one area. And it's like, oh, and then you look around and realize, yeah, they're getting blasted with sun right here. And then maybe come around a corner and you see a few deciduous trees. And when you step back and look, more shade. The walls are never in the sun nearby, much more shelter from the wind. And so I understand that that's imperative to deal with the weather that those trees experience.
The pavilion walls, they don't only provide security and enclosure to the space, but they protect from the wind, of course. We get severe storms in Washington throughout the summers and springs especially. So wind's a factor, but many of the trees are heavy and they don't even need to be tied down to be secured in those pavilions. But I don't think the average person realizes how important exposure is for growing a healthy plant. Yeah. And bonsai specifically, having the right amount of shade, having the right amount of sun, even a wall that reflects heat can be very dangerous.
Yes.
To the wrong tree. When the sun hits that wall and reflects radiant heat onto leaves, we have to be really careful where we put things.
That's right. And most days of the year, it's not an issue. But if your normal hot day is 92 degrees and it's 102, and if your normal humidity is 75, but for some reason it's down at 45, man, are your trees going to notice that difference.
Yes, and they move. We do move things in and out of display, and sometimes things are off display because they were just worked. It's not that they're not presentable, but they, having a tree that is sparse with leaves, it's so dangerous to have bare branches being hit with direct sunlight. The leaves really protect the branches from desiccation. And so when we work on a tree and we prune it heavily and it looks great, but we sometimes can't put it out until it pushes back a little bit of flush of protection.
What is the kind of shade strategy at the garden?
We do use shade cloth, and we've had to increase it in past years, and I think it's improved the health. We were using shade cloth that would only block out 30%, and we've gone to 50% now. And sun is actually in excess. And I think that's a good thing for the earth, but like, plants often don't need all the sun that they get. The sun heats up the leaves to a point where like photosynthesis actually doesn't even happen. So, but if you can reduce the heat on the leaf surface with shade, you bring the leaf back into an optimal photosynthetic zone that they can grow again.
Yeah, it's one thing that we don't think about from the tree's perspective always. We experience heat and light together, but the tree deals with both of those differently. A lot of species love heat, but they cannot handle the light. And a lot of trees can handle the light, but only if the heat is kept in check. And so you kind of have to manage both of those things. And it sounds like that's just what those trees all require at the museum.
Yeah, and they require it everywhere. And we have the different. It's interesting to see the Mediterranean environment here in San Francisco, and the different plants and the different feel in the air. Yeah, it's something we have to work with when we're growing bonsai for sure.
Yeah, are you doing okay? Are you going to survive in this 72-degree, sunny, low breeze weather? Like, are you surviving so far?
Yeah, I'm just not wearing flip-flops.
If you stay 2 weeks, you might change on that. We'll see. And have you noticed when you put up the shade cloth, has that been a challenge for airflow? And do you see fungal pressures differ, or is the design open enough still that you haven't seen a big change when you started doing more shade cloth?
I think a lot of air flows through the shade cloth. The kind we use is the silver reflective material. It's not the black shade cloth. I feel like the black does have more of a closed knit of material, whereas the reflective aluminum metal looking shade cloth, it diffuses the light, so it really doesn't like block it. It just kind of makes it like softer.
That makes sense.
And the air goes through it pretty well. It's loose.
What time of the year do you have it up?
We usually have to put it up by May, and then we can take it down in September usually.
Okay. That sounds really familiar.
Yeah.
So one thing you said that made me so interested is you were one of a select number of people who was able to learn a lot of bonsai while working with really amazing specimens. And so I'm curious, do you have much of a perspective on, or what does it mean to learn bonsai when you're working with such amazing trees versus learning on just trees that you picked up from the supermarket or wherever it happened to be?
Well, a lot of people are familiar. They haven't been to the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum. They'll see our pictures on the internet somewhere, and it's interesting. Like sometimes when I try to get some inspiration for a certain bonsai species might be handled. And if I search it up on the web, I usually pull up the tree that I'm actually working on. So that's how much our photos of our trees are out there.
Right.
And but getting back to your question, actually Go back,
Yeah,
please.
what's it like learning with great trees? Because not many people have that opportunity. You go and study in Japan, you're surrounded by great trees, and you can learn with all kinds of stuff. You can see and study them every day. People who volunteer for gardens get some amount of help, but it sounds like a lot of your training was really in close proximity to, if not touching, some pretty outstanding material.
So this is where I was going with that last comment, was that people will see our trees, and they often, if they haven't seen them in person though, and they've only seen them in pictures on the internet, they oftentimes are not familiar with what size they are.
Yeah,
and
they're
when they
always so much
see
bigger.
them in person, they think, I thought this was a small little bonsai tree on a table, but they're large trees. These are, we often say that they're 2-person trees. You say how, they're judged by how many people it takes to lift them. And most of our trees can't be lifted by one, a single person by themselves. So the size and proportion is really important in bonsai. And to see like the length of branches, the distance from the trunk, and the first division and bifurcations of the branches. I'm really getting into the weeds here, but that's important. That makes a big difference. And when you don't see that in good material, you might you make early on mistakes growing bonsai where a branch is let to grow too long before it's cut back. Mm-hmm. And branches get straight and cylindrical, and they don't have that taper that really makes a bonsai look in the proper scale.
Yeah, and then the trick is, what do you do at that point?
So that's why, the National Bonsai Apprenticeship really does give a great opportunity. When I came into the museum, it didn't exist yet. I was just like, I was a volunteer that just, gave a little extra time each week, but the National Bonsai Apprenticeship gives people that opportunity to learn on that high quality material and repot trees that have root systems that are hundreds of years old, and that there's not a lot of material in the U.S. that has been where a tree has been in the same pot for over 100 years. And that root system has been pruned, and then at this point, hundreds of years later, it's like almost doing heart surgery sometimes to deal with soil conditions in the pot container that are going to keep that tree going on another 100 years. And a lot can happen to a root ball in that amount of time. So it gives people that opportunity, and I'm proud to say that how much the museum has trained bonsai professionals around the country. There's like a lot of people that have learned bonsai at the National Bonsai and Penjing Museum that are contributing so much to the community around the country, and I would love to list off a few. Like the Chicago Botanic Garden has Chris Baker that learned there and was an apprentice. And, Aaron Packard at the Pacific Bonsai Museum, he was not an apprentice, but, he learned bonsai at our museum. There's Henry Basile is at the Denver Botanic Gardens, taking care of the Japanese gardens there and working with Larry Jackal. And Angelica Ramirez now is recently appointed curator of the Louisville Botanic, or it's called the Waterfront Botanic Gardens in Louisville, Kentucky. So she's developing a collection there of bonsai. Andy Bello was an apprentice, and he's assistant curator now. Danny Coffey is
right.
he's not working in a public garden, but he's a bonsai professional and an artist that's in Asheville, North Carolina, and he's takes care of incredible collections privately.
You're essentially the closest thing to what we might think of as an apprentice model in Japan in terms of producing people that have gone out to make outsized contributions all over the country.
The Huntington has Aaron Hughes that
Right.
that has is helping with their Japanese gardens and bonsai collection. So we've really, I think, shared a lot of knowledge. And there's others that might not be in public roles, but that have learned, and it's I bet it's enriching their lives and the people that are around them.
Well, that is an amazing list of amazing people right there. And that is really doing a lot. Interesting how many of them are continuing to work in public facing, sharing bonsai with the world roles. It's
Yeah.
like somehow the people for whom that role appeals end up in Washington, D.C., and then from there they go on to do that great work.
It's not to take away from all the bonsai professionals that have learned in apprenticeships in Japan, because they are obviously doing incredible work coming back from Japan, and being artists and nursery owners, and caring for client trees. There is no doubt the value of that. You can see it in their work, but also there's other many ways to learn this art form.
And there are very different roles to play once you've acquired that knowledge. And what always interests me so much about these gardens are that they are the number one way in which non-bonsai owners interact with fantastic material. And a lot of people find these trees to be incredibly compelling. And I think that's a big part of the reason why bonsai has been experiencing so much popularity in recent years, is many thousands of people are seeing great trees all over the place these days. And it was different 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot more public bonsai collections. I think public areas see the how engaged people get with the natural world when they see bonsai. It really introduces them to the trees and the plants around us.
And on that note, as of bonsai as a bridge to nature, bonsai is also the relationship of specifically people to nature. And unlike in our own collections, it's not us with our trees, is you all are the current custodians. And it really reinforces that point, because the public collections have trees that have been bonsai for so darn long. Many, many people have contributed over the years. And so what we're looking at is kind of the whole of what are all of these contributions over all of this period of time, and what do those trees look like? They tend to look pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
which is why it was fun to hear you talk about. I mean, this is why you do what you do, I'm sure, but it was fun to hear about, the coordination among the other bonsai gardens and how that might provide some fun fruit to help people, again, interact with a style, a species, or an approach that anyone finds interesting.
Yeah, it's worth documenting the provenance of these trees. They're special. Yeah.
Is there a lot of documentation that, do you write a note every single time someone works on a tree, or are there kind of periodic checks? How does the garden kind of contribute to the provenance of an individual tree on an ongoing basis?
Oftentimes, a tree's hard file will have information from the original artist, their approach, their thoughts, their techniques. So we have that to go back to and understand, how this tree was created over time. And then, since once trees are at the museum, we try to keep the best records that we can of that continuation of that process. I mean, still, it's better to do the work and not record it than to not do it. Yep. But we do the best we can to keep good records of everything.
And so, how do you navigate it? You have trees from different artists and different time periods. How do you, once in a while, you just plain have to make decisions on trees and it might send them on a different road. How do you kind of navigate thinking of, is this fork in the road going to take me closer to my understanding of the original interpretation of the design, or is it going to take me in a direction that I think would be good for the tree and feels? It's just, a lot of people love thinking about how to navigate that. I'm curious how you approach it.
Well, when you're styling a bonsai tree, our trees are often donated to the museum, considered to be finished, but of course they're never finished, and they're always changing and growing. And if a tree isn't changing and growing, I feel like it's going the wrong way. It's dying, but that change is subtle. We're talking about change over decades. So it doesn't have to be abrupt and change immediately. It doesn't have to be like a totally new design. It's sometimes it's lightening a branch, or letting an area get stronger, or letting it grow longer or thicker. That can be done by how much foliage is left on a tree. When I look and think about how to approach and keep a tree in a historically important design, then I'm going to look at what the tree is showing, and what has been done with the branches in the past, what angles are being used, are they acute, obtuse, what lengths and proportions have been used over the past, and then take into account what is known by the particular artist. For instance, like how we know a lot about how John Naka approached and interacted with his trees. His trees are photographed, many times, and we know like the angle of his pads, and from his books and his illustrations, we know the angles that he liked to use, and the shapes and the diamond foliage pads. So that would be taken into account, as opposed to like a tree that may have been designed by Stanley Chin, who was and lived in the U.S. but learned Penjing in China at a young age, and then practiced like almost isolated in his backyard in the DC metro area for his whole life. And his trees are Chinese Penjing. They are the Sichuan school. They're the wiggly worm shaped branches, and he didn't follow that same pattern that John Naka, who studied in Japan, did. So, and his trees are very unique. They're in a very narrow and tall, oftentimes they're in a very tall, like taller rather than wider. And not that wide canopy of a Japanese form, triangular canopy. So those approaches are taken into account. Of course, we don't know what that person would do with the tree if they were there to style it, but we're trying to keep those with that same intent.
Seeing the diversity of the branch work on the trees in the different pavilions is kind of mind-boggling, that you and your staff and the volunteer crew, you're working in completely different idioms, and the fact that the trees show so much diversity is awesome. You mentioned the professionals that train in Japan in an incredibly narrow set of approaches and often techniques. That doesn't work for the goal of a museum like this, where you're working across all that. I think it's really impressive to be able to code switch from tree to tree and kind of, okay, well, we're going to push you in that direction and you in that direction. We're going to pull you over. And they all have their own paths. Whereas if it's your collection of your stuff, you can kind of do whatever you want with every last one of them. And then that creates a look that we might associate with an artist. And that's just not what you all are doing.
No, we're maintaining with those, trying to keep things historically significant, to tell a story of bonsai over time.
Well, it's working. It's looking fantastic.
Thank you.
Do you have any big dreams for interesting things going on into the future, or is it enough of a challenge just kind of making everything happen year to year?
Well, the best thing that I can do is stay in the collection and not like it's great to visit other gardens and know what's going on, but the best thing to do is to be there and be present in maintaining it. But some of the projects I shared with the Plant Collection Network are things that are happening long term, and that hopefully will bring curators together too, and we'll have more frequent connections going forward, curators between other gardens around the country, because we're all so spread apart and we're all so busy in our own collections, but it would be nice if we connect and come together more often. So hopefully that project will do that.
Well, that's about as nice a note to end on as any. Was there anything else you wanted to share with us today?
No, just welcome everyone to come out and visit the museum and support local bonsai artists and practitioners and nurseries. I mean, that's our goal is to support the industry. As a whole, we're creating a model example of what bonsai is, and it's those individual artists and nurseries that are pushing and changing what bonsai will be. So they should be supported.
And if someone's planning a visit, what's the best first step they should take if they want to come by and see all of this?
Yeah, you really just need to get there. We're open 10 to 4 every day, most of the year. Just there's some winter holidays that we're closed, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. This was a pleasure.
Thank you, Jonas.
The music on today's podcast was brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.